and Sawyer Rogers. Now Arthur, originally, he was born in Iowa, and he came to California in his youth, and he was a fruit picker before he became a sales clerk at an oil company, before starting his own oil company, the Naval Oil Company, during California's second oil boom of the 1920s and 30s. He met his wife Soya up in the Milpitas area. They married in 1917, and she was going to a school to get her teaching credentials, known as the California State Normal School, which then became known as San Jose State University. She did teach a little sporadically after they married, but what was interesting was Arthur Rogers, he actually wasn't living in this area at the time. He was actually living in the Bakersfield Taft area. And so he was looking for gas stations all along the Central Coast, or I should say Central Coast and in the Central Valley. And so when he came out here, we believe he fell in love with this area. So between the years 19... Is that me? Sorry. Gosh, it's not spam call. Sorry. I hate robocalls. Never answer them. I don't know why I get those calls. They're saying, "Oh, why don't you work for a remote company?" It's like, well, no, you're probably trying to get me into something and you're going to get personal information. You know, I never pick those up. Where was I?
Came up here.
Yeah, I came up. That's right. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And so what was interesting was Arthur Rogers, between the years 1929 and 1930, he bought 3 pieces of land very close to the home for $10. It took him a full construction year from 1929 to 1930 to build an English-style Tudor home for $12,000 under the guidance of architect Charles Mano. He didn't want a simple cottage like that. He had actually gone to England and had brought back more grand designs for an English-style Tudor home. Now, what's interesting is the second owner, Clifford Chapman, who this property was named after, was born in 1930. But I'm going to go back and forth between the two owners because they have no relationship whatsoever, but kind of what each owner did on their impact on the house throughout their time of living there in this area. Now, this Dutch windmill and this swimming pool, it's hard to see. There is a swimming pool down there. It is covered up by the tarp. This was built in 1934 by Arthur Rogers. And what was really cool, it was actually a glass enclosed swimming pool. So it's kind of like a terrarium effect. And the Rogers, they had like plants along the brick walls here that they would have plants in. And the windmill was really cool. It had 2 pumps in it. One pump would bring up salt water from the ocean, and a second pump would desalinize and recycle this water, and it would trickle out over glass terracotta tiles as an early solar heating system.
Whoa.
To me, that is ingenious for 1934 because there was electricity, but no solar panels. However, a lot of the Rogers' nieces said the water was never really warmer than 73 degrees, so Arthur Rogers simply said, well, if the water's just too cold for you guys, I can just put a little rowing boat in there, and you can just paddle around in that. So he did that. I mean, that's better than 40-degree water in San Francisco. That water's freezing. So I'm like, 73, that's pretty nice. I mean, I would think that 80, even if it's not 80, I'd be happy with that. That's warm up to me. Now, this koi pond, this was built prior to 1991 by Clifford Chapman. And there are 6 koi in there. Originally, we thought they were 14 years old, but they are now, I think from one of my colleagues said they're now 17 years old. They can live anywhere from 20 to 30 years. Some can live up to 40 to 50 years. And the reason we have this string here is a deterrent for any seagulls or herons or raccoons, as you can see by all the photos. However, the fish are very smart. If they so much as see the shadow of a heron, they will immediately go under the koi statue and swim into the deeper water. And this pavilion of 1,000 moons, this was built to provide additional shading and protection for the koi fish. It was built in the traditional Japanese style. It's all wooden pegs. There's nothing metal except for the wind chimes and the hook that it's hanging on. That's the only thing that's probably metal within this structure. So they built that to provide additional shading and protection. Now, here's the wish that the owner would sit there with the little TLC. It's such a pretty house. I'd be worried about like maybe salt water and rain getting inside and everything. Yeah, like you can see how some of the tiles falling off, and I'd be worried about like stuff getting like water getting inside and damaging the interior. But what was interesting was that when Clifford Chapman was alive, and especially the Rogers, they actually had property from where this wall was down to the end of the block and to the end of the street here. And the Rogers, they had a miniature golf course. They had a stable for horses. They had a kennel for dogs, and they were breeders of Irish setters. And they had a large cage with 6 to 7 peacocks that they would let roam freely down by the current dining room / refectory. So they would actually let those roam free. And what's interesting was the Rogers were a very private family. So I guess during that time, there wasn't a lot of residents around here, so they were able to have peacocks. And peacocks are a very noisy bunch of birds, and so that's kind of interesting if they had those. because peacocks are very talk chatty, as they say. Now, this brick structure right here, this is called Close Encounter. This was built by Clifford Chapman. I promise it is not of the third kind, so I will not communicate with any synthesizers to any aliens. I hope I don't. Hopefully not. Otherwise, you've entered the Twilight and we'll need Rod Sterling down here. But you can see many of Clifford's dear friends and family on here. His mother Rose is there in the center, and the name below Clifford, that was his lifelong partner of nearly 40 years, Gene Scheidler. That was his legal name, but he was known to his friends and family as Don Scheidler. And Clifford wrote in his will that those who were still alive, that when they did pass on, they and their families could have their celebration of life on the property. I don't know if anyone is buried in these bricks. I do not wish to open any of these bricks, because if someone is indeed buried in there, I believe the expression "let the dead lie in peace" should be respected. And there is a name of Betty Crocker on there. Unfortunately, it does not have anything to do with General Mills. And what's interesting is, this is a funny off note, I'm going to tell you a little off the fact that Betty Crocker was actually not a real person. Although there were ads supposedly that showed a woman there, I would think if there was a real Betty Crocker, then a lot of people would be getting sued for that name and using recipes with that name guidance. So there was no real person named Betty Crocker. It's just the name of a dear friend. It was a popular name. I don't know how it was named, but General Mills has nothing to do with this property. I'll just tell you that. Just tell you that off the record. Now we're going to go into the Begonia house, and I'll tell you how to cook it. And you're good, because you guys, that's what I taught you.
Yes, Christopher, thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much.
Very much. I'm going to take you guys in the Begonia house and tell you how Clifford became the owner of this property.
Have somebody take. Come on, there we go.
You're very lucky, because they're in their peak, and we're hoping they'll stay this way through September 21st. That's when we're a big auction event swinging by the sea. Now, I mentioned that Clifford Chapman, who this property was named after, was born in 1930. And he actually grew up in Guadalupe, about 30 minutes south of here. And he had served in the Korean War from 1950 to 1954 as a naval electrical engineer. And when he got out, he started attending classes at Cal Poly. But he, excuse me, sorry about that. Well, so when he got out, he had some credits and started attending classes at Cal Poly. But he needed some money while he was going to school. So he got a job as a janitor at Marshall's Jewelry Store. And that is the first sign, the original 19th century stained glass window from that building. That building is still on Marsh Street. There's no business in there currently. I think it closed a few years ago, from what someone told me. But he basically worked his way up from janitor in that store. Eventually he became the manager of that store. And then when Arthur Marshall retired in 1960, he was sold the business and became the owner of that store. Now the Rogers, unfortunately, they didn't really get to enjoy the Chapman Estate very long after they retired in 1955-56. Arthur passed in 1960, and Sarah passed in 1962. They didn't have any children. They did have a lot of nieces. However, the house was in a little disrepair at that time, and none of the nieces really wanted to take on the expenses of the property or the taxes. So the Rogers nieces decided to put the house up for auction in the newspaper. Now Clifford, he had often gone by the property with his father when he was a little boy, and he was hoping that just maybe one day he could acquire the property. On the day of the auction, he was sick. He couldn't go, but he did send his real estate agent in his place to try and put a bid on the property. The real estate agent was the only bidder there. He gets the home for a whopping $62,000 and puts an additional $3,000 on top of that to buy many of the furnishings from the Rogers that are still within the house to this day. He didn't move in until January of 1963 with his mother Rose, and he met Dawn a year later in 1964. Now this Begonia house, this is a dedication to Clifford's mother Rose, who in Guadalupe was a prize-winning rose grower, but wanted to try her hand at tuberous begonias. Now what's interesting is we have a big fundraising event called Swinging by the Sea. It's on September 21st, which will be a Saturday this year. And what's really cool is this is where we have our silent auction, so people's reactions are priceless. It's like everyone's jaws are dropping, and like everyone's taking photos with their cell phones. The begonias, I'll tell you some interesting facts. What we do is October 31st is the last day we're open. The day after we are open for the final day of the year, which is October 31st, once we close, what we do is we take the begonias. Now there's a basement in the house that's built partially out of the rock. What our begonia whisperer does is he lets all the buds and the greenery die back, and what he does with the tubers then is he puts them in sawdust, and basically we bring them out at the end of March, and then we replant them. We wash out the crates and all that, and we replant them. And he gives them a secret amount of secret formula in his topsoil that he feeds them and gives them the exact amount. And then after that, let the magic do its work.
Wow.
That's pretty much what he does. It's amazing. He's been doing it for years. I think his name is Tom. He's really good at what he's doing. He's just amazing. And I always think, man, he's doing it so long. He knows, like, and every year they seem to get bigger and bigger. Although this year, he said they did bloom a little early, I think because of the weather. What we're hoping is that some of them will still be at full bloom by the time we get to September 21st. I think they still will be, because I noticed how some of them, they haven't even poked out yet. Like, this one's still pretty small, so I'm thinking some of them are going to still keep coming out. And, like, this one hasn't even gotten any blooms. I'm hoping this one's never bad. Nope. But I don't know. I know nothing about plants. It is not all ADA accessible. And what they were planning to do was they planned to have, if it was to be fully ADA accessible, you'd have to have like elevators, ramps, escalators going down to the basement, up into the living quarters, and all around the house. What they were planning to do was they planned to have a ramp that went from the back of the house in towards the second living room, and then it got delayed because of the pandemic. I don't think it's permanently gone, that they've scrapped it completely. They're planning to have it one day, we just don't know when. And last year, I couldn't even go down here. Sorry about that. I'll get this close to the You can have weddings on the property for about 20 to 25 guests. 50 in total, but that includes the catering stuff, so it's a very small venue. So you can't like have a massive party of 100 people, unfortunately. I wish you could, but you couldn't. But it's really cool because it's really nice, and like I've even been inside here. There's a path that goes from the inside where this little room is back to the front of the house, like a little hallway. It's really cool. I've actually seen it inside. It's really cool. They did a really good job on it. And this is why I think after Hearst Castle, why this property might be one of the most photographic areas on the Central Coast, because of views like this. It's just so pretty. I know. I could just shut up and not say anything for the rest of the day. Yes, I'm gonna get here. It's like I could just dive and say anything.
Yeah.
I know.
Beautiful.
It's we are so lucky where with this area. It's so beautiful that it hasn't been damaged by man or nature too much.
I never want to leave.
I know. It's like you literally died and went to heaven. Literally.
Yes.
That's what is paradise. It's just so pretty. And one of Clifford's nieces, she actually got married on that lawn down there, and that's where I'm assuming they do most of the wedding ceremonies, is right down there. It makes sense. It's flat enough to have people on.
Just good fishing off of those rocks too.
I bet.
And on the golf cottage, what's interesting is when Arthur Rogers first built his property, he didn't actually get the golf cottage until the 40s, and I don't know if I think Henrietta sold him the business, the house.
I'm sorry,
I don't
baby.
know how often, when it was in that time period in the first, but she sold to him, and then he later bought it from her. So when he first built his property, he didn't get the gold cottage immediately until the 1940s. And I should mention there are two stained glass paintings on the back of the gallery here. The one on the lighthouse, I don't know who did that, but the one at the windmill, that was painted by a Cal Poly architects student for his senior project in the 1970s, and his name was William Woods, and that was the first stained glass painting he did, was that of the windmill. And I should mention, we had to replace the roof of the Gull Cottage and the main house 2 years ago to the tune of a little over $500,000. It's not wood, it's not slate, it's like a fiberglass cement material, so it's fireproof, it's man-made, but it'll last longer. I should mention, we also lost some of the wall out of the Gull Cottage because of a lot of the storms we've had, so they had to replace that. It was scary. Luckily, no one was in there, but very scary. And like, this would be another thing if you were to allow tours of the Gull Cottage. That'd have to be ADA accessible too. Like the stairs in there are so narrow. I'd really hit my head going up on these because they're so tight. And it's like it's so precarious to even put an elevator escalator. It would probably knock the whole thing into the sea. That's why I don't think they'll ever allow tours of the Gull Cottage, which is kind of sad because it's really cute. It's really cute now. It's really
See, I'd
small.
like to
but
go down there and see what.
I know. That's what impresses me is how it's still there. And that's one of our big concerns is the seal, and I'll tell you about that a little later. Now, on the other side here of where this outdoor dining area is, there's a dining room that can sit on the original dining room. On the back that's going to sit 6. What I'm going to show you at the front of the house is the current dining room can sit 25. And we can actually see a little bit of it here through this window here. But when we get to the front, that's where you'll really get to see it, what it really looks like. Like you can kind of look and see it through here a little bit, but it's not as great of a view as from the front of the house. And one of them did have a dog named Mercedes. I'm going to assume that because why else would there be a Mercedes-Benz logo on a doghouse? It has to make sense. If I'm wrong, then I've created a very tall tale in me.
It's also kind of a cool, piece to put on a doghouse.
That's true. Peace sign. Sort
He's
of.
probably had like 4 Mercedes. He's all like been drifting and breaking. And sent spares.
Studebakers. He was so rich he could afford a new Studebaker every year.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what was. He make most of his money selling oil when he has a naval oil company. He actually sold gas nozzle parts that he gave to gas companies. So that kind of interesting. Most people think, oh, he was a petroleum. He wasn't really an oil man. He was in Afghanistan at the time. He was gas man. Alas, I wish they were here on the property, but they're not. I know. That's why when we see the 3-car garage over there, what's interesting is when the Rogers first built this property, where we're standing, this was the original driveway. And the original garage door was right here where the front door is. And the original front door was that third window right there. And so then what happened was later was, if you want to see, this is what the driveway was, where we're standing, this is the original driveway. And this is the original garage door, and the original front door was right there.
Gotcha.
And so what's interesting was what Clifford did was later when the Rogers, the current 3-car garage is over down there, that stone structure, is a 3-car that Arthur Rogers built in the 40s. What happened was Arthur Rogers, they converted it into a fireplace living room. What Clifford did was after his mother Rose passed, because the original dining room on the back of the house could only sit 6, Clifford converted this into the current dining room / refectory, which is another fancy term for dining room. This can sit 25. And there are statues and paintings on the ceilings in the refectory that depict the 4 seasons.
How nice.
And I should mention that during our live auction, one of the prize events you can win is a 3-course meal for 25 guests in that refectory.
Oh.
Yeah, and then here's another kicker. There's a guy, his name is Tom, he's a local guy. He does a Santa Maria style barbecue for 50 guests by the Koi Pond / Begonia House. So that's the other big, and I'll tell you, the bidding price starting for both of them start at $10,000. And usually multiple families bid on them. We usually sell 2 of them because 2 families want them and they'll agree to a certain price. So we end up selling 4 things in total. So out of one family, one time I think one family bought both of them. One family bought both the dining room inside the house and for the barbecue. I think one family did that one time. So yeah, it's amazing. And that's what Swinging by the Sea does is basically, because we're like a non-profit organization, that's how we raise most of our money that goes into the house is through some from the city and through the docent tours and through Swinging by the Sea. That's how we make most of our money and what goes into maintaining the upkeep of the property. I should mention that the square footage of this house is approximately 17,000 square feet with 5.5 bedrooms, 5 baths. One of them is an office, and Clifford's bedroom is actually right here next to the solarium that he did as an add-on in the 70s. And he actually had a step-down dressing room. So when he's in his bedroom, he takes a step down, he's in his dressing room. And this fountain, off the record, Clifford did acquire this at an estate sale up in Atherton, which is about 30 minutes south of Menlo Park, if you're familiar with the Bay Area. Yeah. So he got it from there. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I would say that would be the Pleasanton of the South there, I would say, like around there. It'd be kind of like that. Yeah. And do you watch your step when you're going down here? There's a bit of a dip unless you want to go around with the dip down. And I'm just going to recall. I just don't wait. There's a bit of a dip there.
Okay.
Well, the grass is not, I don't know if I think it's real. I would assume so. What's interesting is what they want to do is if they allow tours of the ground floor, they're thinking of converting the solarium into the gift shop. And I could see that. That would totally make sense. It's very open. It would be very hot, though. You'd have to put a lot of fans in there. But somebody would probably do something and figure something out if they do. And then this cell structure right down there, that's the current 3-car garage that was built in the 40s by Arthur Rogers. That was what he did later. And as I mentioned, he was so rich he could afford a new Studebaker every year. And there are no Studebakers in there, unfortunately, and that door is locked anyway. It's now just a storage area, basically what we do. Now, what's interesting is the property line on this side ends on after the 3-car garage. But do you guys see that lot of land with that house on it? I think it's a rental property. It's a big regional. But picture it's 1948. There's no house there on that where that lot of land is. It's just a barren lot of land. In 1948, Arthur Rogers was offered that lot of land on the other side of the three-car garage where that house is standing. He was offered it for a modest $500, and he said, "Absolutely not. I spent $10 for 3 tracts of land, built a nice English-style Tudor for $12,000. Nobody in their right mind is going to buy there or even build on there." Well, unfortunately for Arthur Rogers, a little spinster from Martha's Vineyard bought that land and built a house there. Now, you and I, if we had a very nice sunken living room and didn't want such and such Snoop snooping and looking at our sunken living room, would simply put up curtains. Arthur Rogers took this to an extreme degree of paranoia, and in November of 1948, he built that lighthouse there as an obstruction of view of her property. It was never operational. If it had been operational, he would have probably had to register to the U.S. Coastal Commission, whatever that thing is that registers lighthouses. But he just built it there to block her view. And if they did allow tours of the sunken room, you could see where it makes perfect sense. It completely blocks the view of that property. No one can even go in there, not even the city. There are stairs inside there. I looked through the windows. You can kind of see stairs. It's very hard to see. But I don't even know if they can even support a person's weight because they look so rotted away. But yeah, but there is a seawall that was built around the property by Arthur Rogers by hand using an entire railroad cart full of cement for $7,000 in 1937 in response to a large storm.
So
now
can you get down to the beach from here?
No, you
Well,
can't.
I mean, at all?
No,
from
well,
up here?
there was a path that went down from there, but I don't know if it ever went down to the water, but it's so badly corroded away. Only Cal Fires can go down if they need to like rescue a distressed kayaker or a swimmer. But I should mention that the seawall, like it was with a lot of the recent storms, and some geologists did look at it, it's going to cost over $2 million to shore up. It's not cheap. I mean, see, with the Chapman Foundation, what we want to do is we want to restore the windmill. Although it'll never operate again, we want to give it a new widow's walk, new sails, and a new paint job. Kind of restore it to its old glory. The seawall is our next big concern. Some geologists did look at the seawall. They said it was stably sound, but we don't know how long that is before potentially the lighthouse and a lot of the land goes tumbling into the ocean. That's like the big concern we have. And I should mention Clifford and Don's basement has about approximately 4,000 champagne glasses in it.
Oh my God.
They loved to entertain. And when the Rogers were alive, this house, it got raided by the dry raid prohibition. Because I've been in the basement by where the wine racks are. There's an empty space, and what they told us there was a spiral staircase that was where that is that went up into the main house. So what happened was the Rogers friends, they were partying a little too hard, and they were hauling up kegs of illegal beer and wine up those staircases. And so when this house was hit by the dry raid agents, guess what the Rogers, they were always never around. So they always had plausible deniability. And I always would say, dang it, I could have been alive at that party without all the booze, man. I could have. Maybe in another lifetime, I could have.